Protect your peace. You know that moment when you turn down a request and the silence that follows weighs heavier than any answer? The person in front of you looks at you in a way you recognize: disappointment, judgment, maybe something worse. And suddenly, you're the selfish one in the story, the cold one, the one who doesn't care about others. You keep playing that no over and over in your head for hours, replaying whether you could have said it differently, whether you should have given in, whether something is wrong with you. But somewhere, at this very moment, there's another person who said the exact same word. No, with the same firmness, to the same kind of request. And they didn't feel any of that. No downward spiral, no internal judgment, no weight, zero. But what about you? You who are still carrying that weight hours later. What does this other person know that you don't? Because it's not luck, it's not coldness, and it's definitely not a lack of empathy. It's a specific psychological wiring. And it can be understood. People who say no without guilt aren't cold. They aren't insensitive. It's not that they don't feel anything for others. They've developed 3 distinct psychological mechanisms that most people were never taught to have. And psychology has a name for each one of them. You aren't broken for feeling guilt when you refuse. What these people have is a different internal wiring, a wiring that can be recognized and, even more than that, can be rebuilt. This video will show you the 3 psychological mechanisms behind saying no without guilt. And at the end, it will give you a simple self-assessment rule to know exactly what kind of no you're practicing. Whether you're someone who still feels that wave of shame every time you refuse, whether you're someone who admires those people who say no so naturally, or whether you're someone who has already learned to refuse but still doesn't understand where that ability came from. Stay with me. Let's start with the first reason. Most people feel guilt when they say no because they've fused 2 things that shouldn't be together: the act of refusing a request and the verdict on who you are as a person. This is the invisible mechanism. You say no, and automatically, without realizing it, your brain translates that as, I'm a bad person. I'm selfish. I don't deserve to be loved. The no becomes a confession. Think of it this way. Someone asks you for a favor that you really can't do. You refuse, politely, honestly. And yet you spend the rest of the day silently defending yourself, replaying whether it was fair, if the person is angry, if you should have found a way to say yes. You refused the request. But in your head, what's on trial is you. Albert Ellis, founder of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, identified the need for approval as one of the 12 core irrational beliefs at the heart of emotional suffering. The specific belief is this: I need to be liked and needed to have value. And when you carry this belief without realizing it, every no you say is a direct threat to your identity. Let that sink in. It's not that you're weak. It's not that you're overly sensitive. It's that your internal evaluation system is operating based on an equation that says, my value depends on being needed. My value depends on saying yes. People who say no without guilt have broken that equation. Psychologists call this cognitive diffusion, the separation between what you do and who you are. Their no doesn't carry a verdict on their worth as a person. It's information. It's a choice aligned with what matters to them. Nothing more. Here's what that looks like in real life. When these people refuse, they don't monitor the other person's face for signs that they're still liked. They don't spend hours replaying whether they made the right decision, because the decision wasn't about who they are, it was about what makes sense for them in that moment. They aren't distant. They aren't apathetic. They simply process the refusal through a different path. The big question remains: where did you learn that your value depended on saying yes? This leads us directly to the second reason. The moment the story gets deeper, most people who say no without guilt weren't born that way. They learned it, the hardest way possible. Imagine you're 7 or 8 years old. You learn early on that when someone around you gets angry, you need to fix it. That when you refuse, something important might be lost. So you start saying yes before you even have time to think about whether you want to say yes. Automatic, without a choice. Pete Walker, a trauma therapist, described this exact pattern. He called it the submission response, what became known as the fawn response. The fourth trauma survival mode, alongside fight, flight, and freeze. Fawning is different from the other three. You don't fight, you don't run, you don't freeze. You agree, automatically, with everything. Because your nervous system learned that conflict was costly, that love was conditional. That approval had to be earned through agreement. That saying no was dangerous. John Bowlby's attachment theory explains the root of this. When we grow up in environments where love is unpredictable or conditional, the nervous system learns the equation. No equals abandonment. And this equation is etched so deeply that it continues to operate in adulthood, long after the original danger has disappeared. There is a side to this dynamic that is rarely discussed. Many of the people who say no without guilt today used to be exactly that person. They were the ones who always showed up first, the ones who never refused, the ones who carried everyone else's weight and called it caring, the ones who said yes for so long that they no longer knew how to distinguish what they wanted from what others needed from them, until they reached a point where they just couldn't do it anymore. Not because they stopped caring, but because that caring started to destroy them. You aren't selfish. You aren't heartless. Their no, and maybe yours, isn't indifference. It is survival intelligence finally applied to themselves. It's the scar of someone who burned themselves so many times on their own compliance that they learned to recognize the flame before getting close. This leads us to the third reason, and this is the one that was built on purpose. It's not about unlearning a belief. It's not about recovering from an old pattern. It's about alignment. Carl Rogers, one of the most influential humanistic psychologists of the 20th century, described what he called the internal locus of evaluation, the ability to evaluate your own choices based on an internal standard, not external approval. People with a strong internal locus don't need a consensus to feel good about their decisions. They already know what matters to them. In daily life, the difference is unmistakable. Most people say no and immediately scan the other person's face for permission, looking for a sign that everything is okay, that they're still liked, that they can be forgiven for refusing. People who say no without guilt don't do that. They say no and scan their own values. And you? What do you scan after your no? Not because they don't care about others, but because they've developed an internal compass so clear that external approval simply isn't the first source of information they consult. They know what they are protecting. They know what they are saying yes to by saying no to something else. Their no isn't closing a door on the other person. It's keeping a door open for themselves. It's not rejection. It's integrity. But this is where things get complicated. There's a crucial detail that most videos about boundaries ignore, because not every guilt-free no is the same thing. Everything you've heard so far is true, but it's not the whole story. There is a version of the guilt-free no that isn't psychological health. It's detachment. Some people say no without feeling anything because they've built a wall. Not a boundary, a wall. And the difference between the two is exactly what you need to understand before you leave. A boundary is selective. It says no to what costs you and yes to what matters. It's built from self-knowledge. It requires clarity on what you value and enough openness to let in what is worthwhile. A boundary protects without isolating. A wall says no to everything. Without discrimination, it's not built from self-knowledge, it's built from fear. No vulnerability, no intimacy, no risk. Just safety through absence. Boundaries are selective. Walls are absolute. This brings us to the uncomfortable question no one asks. After your no, are you moving towards something or simply moving away from everything? Because there's a real difference between protecting your energy and using refusal as armor against anything that might reach you. One no comes with clarity. The other comes with fear disguised as clarity. This isn't weakness. Noticing the difference is honesty, and that's where everything changes. So, Apply this self-assessment rule. It's simple and direct. After your no, do you feel relief or numbness? Relief means you honored something real, that there was a value being protected, that you said no to one thing while simultaneously saying yes to something that matters more. A commitment to yourself, a personal boundary, your own integrity. Numbness means the wall is doing the work, not you. That the no was automatic, not a conscious choice. Armor, not a decision. There's a second question. Does your no open up space for what matters? Rest, focus, self-respect? Or does it simply shut everything out without distinction? If your no comes from self-knowledge, from values, from survival intelligence finally applied to yourself, it isn't selfish. It's one of the most honest things a person can do. You aren't cruel. You aren't apathetic. You aren't broken. People who feel zero guilt saying no don't have less empathy than you. They have a different relationship with their own value. And that relationship was built, whether through inner work, through pain, or through years of silent learning about what they need to stay whole. That person who spent hours overthinking the no they gave, they were exactly where you were. The difference is what happens when you finally understand where the weight came from and realize you don't have to carry it anymore. Psychologically capable, honest, whole. Protect your peace, because protecting your peace is exactly that. If this video reached you today, it wasn't by accident. Leave a comment telling me which of the 3 types you recognize in yourself. Are you recovering from a pattern of always saying yes? Does your no come from your values? Or are you still figuring out what is a boundary and what is a wall? I read all the comments, and if you want to keep understanding how your mind works, subscribe. I make videos like this every week for people exactly like you.